so now moving back to the capital project performance report, item 11. So, Ruth, you're with us, and thanks very much for coming to the table. And I know that you've got some headline comments that you want to make, and then we'll move into any questions. So, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all in person. I've got quite a bit of an introduction, so sit tight. This is the first report, obviously, that we're going to be talking about deliverability, because last month we were really focused on COVID impacts with the lockdown. So I want to talk a little bit about the budget this financial year, the forecasts, a little bit about supply chain risks and issues, and we've also got each of the delivery units here, so they're going to speak specifically to deliverability of their programs. So in terms of the current forecast this financial year, in the report you'll see that project managers are forecasting 398 against 406. That's the core program, so that would result in a spend of 98% of our core program. So from performance in previous years, you will have seen project managers' forecasts tend to be quite high at the beginning of the financial year and then slowly decrease throughout the year. So last financial year, at the same time, project managers were forecasting a delivery of 115%. And as you know, we ended up with 94% by the end of the year. So this year, we've specifically worked with our project managers to drive more realistic forecasting at the start of the year. And you'll see that's reflected in the 98% in the report as at the end of August. So having earlier visibility of that forecast position does enable us to manage delivery more at a program level. So we're able to deliver to our overall group of activities budget. So what I mean by that, we bring back projects, we accelerate projects to mitigate delay or carry forwards of other projects. But I would say that given previous trends in relation to forecasts, it may be that we see that forecast decrease, especially because of the environmental constraints that we're currently in. So we'll speak to those constraints shortly. In terms of spend to date, at the time of writing of the report, it was at 60 million. August actually ended up being at 48 million, which was against a forecast of 52. So that means that our spend to date was 92% of the forecast. So in terms of our future forecasts, before we speak specifically to deliverability, I just want to provide some context on what we need to be able to achieve this year in order to meet our capital program. So in order to meet the current forecast, we need to spend an average of 40 million per month. Last year, we spent 33 million per month. So the required 40 million average spend per month does reflect a step change in the budget this financial year. We have an additional 46 million in budget. The increased budgets for financial year 22, mainly 3 waters, major facilities, IT and parks. So the delivery unit leads here will be able to speak to what they're doing in order to meet those increased budgets when they come up. We spent 94% of our core program in financial year 21, 89% of the core and external funded budget. So it's pretty clear that we need to increase our performance this year to meet our committed budget. So I'm going to make some general comments about deliverability that applies across all of capital. And then we'll get the delivery units down. So firstly, COVID impacts. So you'll see in the report from page 107, our current delivery forecasts as at the end of August would not have considered COVID-related impacts. You will get to start to see that in future reports. And we'll be providing more information in relation to that, as well as what we're doing to mitigate those impacts. To provide some understanding of projects that are going to be impacted, they are those that were mobilised prior to Alert Level 4 lockdown, so the ones that were out there on site. On page 108, you'll see that we had 110 projects mobilised prior to Alert Level 4 lockdown, and 96 of them were remobilised in Alert Level 3. So they're subject to variations in both cost and time. So all capital projects in our early phases, the ones that were in planning and design, no impact or very minimal impact. So we also continued our procurement processes during that time as well, so there'll be no impact on those projects. In terms of COVID-related cost variations at the time of writing, we haven't received any for the recent lockdown. Details in relation to them, we've spoken about these before, they are commercially sensitive, but we will be able to provide a summary update of those variations in future reports, just none of the detail. In terms of time-related variations, we will provide visibility of that to the committee. So just as a heads up where there are time impacts on projects due to lockdown and restrictions, we may also see budget phasing changes. So you might start to see some projects carrying forward into future years. And while we'll seek to mitigate those delays, it's not always possible, but where budget phasing may move beyond this financial year, we will seek to mitigate the impact at a program level by accelerating or bringing back projects into this year. So secondly, in terms of environmental constraints, is supply chain risks and issues. So the ongoing impact of COVID-19 is impacting on our supply chain as well as shipping. So you'll see that there are specific risks and issues in the report from page 109 to 114. These are the capital projects that are currently being impacted by our supply chain risks and issues. We will provide this to you on a monthly basis, also providing any projects that no longer have those risks and issues, and you'll see in the report that there are already 2 in that position. So these do have the potential to impact on the delivery of our capital program. However, we do mitigate to work against that as much as we can. And you'll see in there as well that there are mitigations against each of the projects and what we're doing about it in order not to create an impact on our program of work. So I've invited Jane O'Toole today. She's our head of procurement, and so I want her to provide a little bit more information for you, more on the current environment generally in relation to the supply chain risk and issues, what actions are underway from a procurement perspective, but also what's happening across the industry in all of New Zealand.
Afternoon. I'm going to give you a bit of information in terms of the general environment. I'm not going to talk very specific because obviously that's what Ruth and the team talk about in particular projects. But I think it's important just to talk to Council about the environment and what it really looks like globally and what it looks like from a New Zealand perspective and what we're expecting in the future. Apologies to the councillors who heard some of this in the Audit and Risk Committee, so some of this will be repeated, but I think it's really key for everybody to understand, what's happening. So I think it's probably also important at this stage to mention it is really, really unprecedented what's happening with our supply chain globally. I know we all know that because of the COVID impact, also pretty unprecedented in terms of how that's rolled out. But the last time we saw something like this probably would have been around about World War II. And even then, supply chain resilience was in a completely different place. We didn't have just-in-time, lean. We didn't have low-cost jurisdiction, procurement, all those sort of things. It's completely different. So the experts in the industry are struggling to, a bit like economists, are struggling to really predict what's going to happen. So from a global perspective, a lot of supply chains are reliant on China, South Asian and low-cost jurisdiction supply chains. In recent years, there's been some major developments just generally globally, which COVID's really impacted and exacerbated, such as risk of trade wars, nationalism, protectionism, issues around human rights and sustainability in supply chains. So really, COVID's just exacerbated those issues in terms of what's going on out there. And 86% of the world, in terms of the supply chain, has been impacted, and that's actually a massive number. So 86% globally of supply chains have been negatively impacted by COVID. 3/4 of procurement and supply professionals have said products in China were integral to their supply chain. So it's expected companies will increasingly consider China support and other strategies to mitigate future risk, and we're expecting that they're moving into that space right now to try and mitigate risk as much as possible. At the same time, free trade agreements and further impacts on businesses will impact how they structure their supply chains going forward. So there's just major change out there. So really, the questions that are still to be answered, and I think everybody needs to be really clear on, is how this will affect the behaviours of organisations commercially, how companies will consider demand. So demand significantly changed because of behaviours. So companies that were procuring one thing will now be procuring something different. That's changed demand. That's then had a knock-on effect. So that's the sort of thing that's happening out there, and those behaviours are yet to be completely seen. There's questions around how people will deal with those fluctuation demands, materials, products. What this really does is drives massive uncertainty around recovery, because we can't predict recovery as we would have been able to previously. Also, companies will consider maintaining security of supply through insourcing. They might do that through accelerating projects and trying to get things sorted out faster than they would have done, so accelerating projects, which we've even mentioned ourselves. There'll also be different options that they're reconsidering around lean, agile, just in time, etc. And really how it will impact the social and environmental agenda of the world. So globally, that's what's happening. I'm sure you're all aware of that, but I just think it's worth noting. The Chartered Institute of Procurement Suppliers said that we can't see a supply chain have this sequential recovery in the world, because if we do, it will just be a forever issue in the supply chain. So there really is that reliance on people like the World Bank to support the countries that are going to need that support so we can recover. So what does that look like for us is the biggest question. So what we've seen is some delays around shipping, obviously. There's fewer ships coming to New Zealand because there's now a higher demand in the Northern Hemisphere. There's lack of commercial air traffic. Before COVID, 80% of freight was carried in the belly hold of passenger flights, which is actually massive, and I didn't realise that. So obviously that's caused a massive issue because we've not got lots and lots of people coming in on planes anymore. There's major delays around pipe, steel and general materials. We're seeing steel prices fluctuate almost daily. Sometimes we can only get prices held, or our contractors come for 24 hours. It makes it a really volatile and competitive market for us to deal with, or for our contractors to deal with. A lot of that's due to demands on mills and booking steel production in rolling schedules. There's examples where we've had major lead times on things like locally sourced timber, and that's because we're looking, or our contractors are looking at alternative solutions. And of course, then that impacts our local supply chain around longevity. And there's obviously increased lead times around materials, and we have had some issues around bitumen, albeit they seem to be pretty resolved for the time being, but that's because they've lost booking spaces on in shipping, or we've had bitumen grade supply issues. So 79% of New Zealand construction companies have said to us that they've had at least one freight issue, and that in the last sort of year. And the three main issues that they are facing is increased costs, general shipping issues, we're trying to get things here on time, and there's definitely push on lead times. So what are we seeing in our tenders? So some of the stuff I can tell you we are seeing, and the risks we're having to mitigate, is around shorter validity periods on offers from tenderers because of the risks to them. Cost increases, obviously there's escalation in costs. We're having to do a lot of negotiation around risk allocation. There is obviously requests for upfront payments and different payment stage options. And obviously there's escalation around lead times. So the government are doing what they can to support this. There's some initiatives that they've put in place. They've worked really closely with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise to understand what their customers are seeing. So NZTE, I think they surveyed 993 of their customers, and they told them that the freight issue is the biggest issue. So the government have put some initiatives in place. They've put an international air freight capacity scheme in place, essential transport connectivity scheme for aviation and non-aviation, and that continues at least up till next March, and it's likely it will continue past that. So that helps us generally, that there's that government lens on it at the moment. So things that we're trying to do to mitigate the risks when it comes to tendering work, really we look at it from two perspectives, strategically and tactically. So strategically, the best thing we can do is it gives that really clear visibility to our contractors on what our programme of work is. And that's because it gives them the opportunity and the chance to mitigate risk with their supply chains, that they are best placed to mitigate the risk with, because it's their supply chain. So strategically, the work that happens in terms of communicating that programme has been really, really critical. Luckily, we were very good at that before COVID, and so we've continued to do that. The other thing is having those strategic supply chain relationships with our critical suppliers to make sure we have clear visibility of the risks. Tactically, it's about early procurement of packages of work that we're going to need. It's about leveraging those supply chain relationships with our main contractors, which they are best placed to do, but it's obviously, it needs that collaboration between us and them. And one of the biggest things I think we can do is in our tenders, and we are doing this every tender that we think there's a risk, it's making the contractors really consider that risk and tell us how they're going to mitigate it, and then we work with them to help them if they need that help. So that's probably the best thing that we can really do. We're in a funny position because we don't buy off the supply chain directly. The contractors do to deliver our programmes and projects. So it's all about that relationship and keeping those strategies in. We've done a few other things. You know, we've bought this steel piling for Hornby Pool early. We'll novate that to the contractor once they're on site. So that's just trying to mitigate the lead time. And we've given visibility of wastewater pipes and fittings to the supply chain, and we've had a big meeting with them, giving them a forward work plan of how much pipe they're likely to need because of our programme for the next year. And that's given them the chance to go and get that product sorted. So that's how it looks. That's the mitigation we're putting in place, and you can see the detail of that through Ruth's report. And we'll continue to have this visibility, work closely with our supply chains, and probably the most important thing is the business units in this council work closely to make sure at every stage we're mitigating these risks where we can. So that's where we are.
Thank you. And you'll continue to give us updates on this area as part of this report?
If you want me to, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that we keep really good oversight as governors over some of the challenges that you've talked about. I mean, clearly there's a lot of work underway and some good thinking as well. So thank you for that. But yeah, I think it's important that we get regular reporting on this so that we're kept abreast of it. Okay. Thank you. Dawn.
Can I just say, I think you've just had a masterclass in expertise that's just been delivered.
Yeah, yeah. Often we hear the problems and the challenges. We don't often hear the problems, the challenges, and the solution to them all in the same presentation. And I think that's what we just heard. So thank you very much.
And that is a team effort, these people as well. I absolutely cannot make these things up on my own. So that is a team effort. Thank you to you and to the team in that case. And, you know, we're very interested in what you presented and will continue to be. So thank you. Are there any... Did we want to take any questions on what we've just heard?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we should do that now. So, Jimmy.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. First one regarding to the watch list on the page 11.
Sorry, just on the supply chain issues that we've just heard.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to specific questions later. Okay. So nothing on
one question. Supply chain. I just want to know that because I'm aware from staff last week, particularly regarding to our procurement the material through the procurement process to order from the overseas shipping. Why some material from overseas, but in the Auckland Harbour rather than in the Littleton or Timaru? This can kind of show distance easy we can get those one. For instance, like you mentioned earlier, those steel pile, etc. My understanding they're already in the Auckland Harbour. However, due to the alert level 4, you can do nothing. So this one, whether it's possible, prevent the form of mitigate the effect in the future.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's very, very complicated in terms of how the stuff's coming into New Zealand and what port it ends up at. Obviously, lockdown's made that considerably worse for us. It's a question we could take back to our contractors because they manage that. We don't manage that. They might be able to talk a little bit about how it ends up there and what they're trying to do to get it here as quick as possible. Because obviously, for them, they've got that requirement to get it done as quick as possible because they don't want their projects held up, nor do we. So that's something that they're considering. But it's a good point, and maybe it's a question we should ask in our tenders about, mitigation around shipping specifically when it comes to ports. So we could ask that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on the matters that James just presented on, Aaron.
Yeah, so there'd be a number of questions, but do we talk to or use economists to try and do some predicting? Because there's a lot of unknowns now, and a lot of the global economies are jacked up for all the wrong reasons. But once the world starts trading as per normal again, things will change considerably, and to the point that we should even give consideration to halting some projects because the pricing's just unrealistic.
We use a company.
No. I know people always say everything keeps going up, but no. I know not everything always does when you're in such extraordinary circumstances.
Well, I'll take the wager on the price of materials.
So, Jane, any comment on that?
I'll take that wager. You look at coming out of during any war, and you look at what price spikes happen, and then you'll get drops for decades after. So I don't know. I'll take the wager, Leanne.
Well, I'm not a betting woman, but we do use a company, Australasian, that look Australasian wide and then look globally for us, and they give us monthly updates on what's going on in supply chain. They are all experts, so obviously we couldn't have a team of people doing it, but that's how we get that information. Then we analyse that. And we talk to them about it. So yes, we do get that advice, which is where some of my advice has come from.
And what do they say?
They're saying they just don't know.
Right.
It's all professionals' opinion. There's
Right.
no facts for them to really hang their hat on. It's just what
So
they're
so
seeing.
then the question is, when things are super highly priced and people don't know, is that the best time to be opening wallets?
It depends on other influencing factors at that time. So if, for example, there's something that's exceptionally high and you know that you're not going to be able to get that for another 12 months, you're going to have to make a call on whether or not you want to change the material, whether you want to hold your program, are your programs critical, is there another program you want to bring forward? So it totally depends on all of those influencing factors at the time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I've got Sam and Yanni. So Sam.
Hey, thanks very much for that. I mean, it's really good presentation. I just wondered, we talked about with the businesses we use, them buying the product on our behalf. Have we looked at, given, I guess, our sort of financial position or our ability to buy and cash flow, at kind of looking at some of those key products we use and saying, actually, we'll take the punt now. It probably goes sort of opposite to what Aaron's saying, but take the punt now and put it all in a yard for a year. Have we considered the other side?
Not holistically, but project by project, that stuff's considered.
Right.
So Hornby Pool, for instance, it was considered worth spending the money to get that steel pile in.
Yep.
So we can novate it over to the contractor, but it's not been looked at holistically in that way, because obviously there's a cost to storage, major cost to storage. So but no, we haven't done that piece of work.
Right. Is that something you would entertain, or?
I'd have to think about it, simply because I don't want to get between the contractor and their supply chain too much, because that can give us bigger risk than the latter.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean,
so that sort of thing would need to be considered.
Thinking is on it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Yanni.
Risk as well.
Yeah, thank you for the extensive update. It's really good. Just obviously a lot of this seems to be tied up with steel. So the idea of using other materials, local materials, like wood, how seriously is that being considered?
As far as I know, and obviously some of the business units will talk about this in a bit more detail, where other materials can be considered, they are considered, certainly in the current climate.
Right.
Definitely.
Okay. I mean, would it be helpful if council kind of adopted a more local materials policy to kind of encourage that in the design?
Again, every action has a reaction. So if we did too much of it, we'd end up with a ball we're perfect, which is where you're putting so much pressure on one part of a supply chain, it falls over and can't carry on. So if we were to look at that, we'd have to look at it holistically. So, is there a certain material we can get faster locally, but without putting too much pressure on them that it's going to make other projects fall over? So we'd have to look at it in that way, as opposed to just everything down one supply chain.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, just there's been some quite innovative things, like, in the past, I know that some of the trees that we've removed have been turned into park benches, for example, rather than just being chipped and taken away. So, but thank you for the work that you're doing on that. I guess I also wondered around if central government was doing anything legally at contract law to kind of protect.
There's lots of stuff going on from a central government perspective, which maybe next month I could give you a bit more on that, to give you a bit of a clue. That they've taken it very seriously, let's put it that way, and there's lots of initiatives that are going on at the moment.
Right. So we're not basically reinventing the wheel at a local level.
And then we are feeding from them all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think to get an update on that next month will be excellent if we can. That would be good. Now, Alistair, was there something that you wanted to add to one of those previous questions?
Apologies for that. Yeah, I was just going to mention we do consider the risk and ownership of product if you're going to look at buying bulk beforehand, And the reason for that is that you have to be concerned around how you novate that into the contract. So there is a negotiation piece that if we bought the material, we take the risk on buying that material. And then we have to then novate the ownership of that back into the contract. So there is some complexities, and Jane's rightly so. We do consider each of those sort of considerations as we go through the process. And the other thing was, I just wanted to mention that we do look at reducing. So if we've got local product that we can use, so you look at the Court Theatre. Court Theatre's got laminated timber in it, but it's also got a steel structure, and that steel structure has also been downsized in order to meet to be able to the capability of the supply chain within New Zealand, rather than having to buy a bigger section of steel elsewhere. So we do consider all aspects, even back down to the basics of the design itself. So I just wanted to make that point. We definitely do, and with working with Jane in particular and the procurement team, we definitely do look how we're going to source our materials, and then how we're going to hand that back to the procurement team within the construction contract. So just wanted to make that point. It happens already, so we're definitely doing it.
Great, thank you very much. All right, Jane, look, thanks for an excellent presentation. Thanks to you and the team for the really important work that you're doing. And we look forward to continuing to be engaged in this particular conversation each month, so that we're updated. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Right, Ruth, back to you.
Thank you. So just one final general environmental risk, and Peter earlier mentioned it, and that is in relation to human resources. So there is an identified risk to our capital program in relation to securing skilled staff for roles. So that's within council, but it's also within our professional services and our contractors. So that has the potential to have significant impacts on the capital program as well. I think it's probably a good time to bring the delivery leads up, because they can speak more specifically to how these things will impact on their program delivery. So we'll be referring to pages 78 to 82 and bring each delivery unit up. So they will talk to their current status, the current risks and issues in relation to delivery of their program in relation to the things that I've just mentioned, but also anything else, and also what they're doing differently to deliver this financial year given larger budget commitments. So firstly, Lynette, so in terms of transport, they have a budget of 145 million this year, and they're currently forecasting 154. So just by way of context, last financial year they spent 141. So we're looking for a step change of 4 million to meet the financial year 22 budget commitment.
Great, thank you. Now, in terms of questions, do you want to take questions for each lead on their subject area one at a time, or do you want to take questions
That's best.
at the end?
Save some coming back
All right,
up.
so any transport questions we deal with, for example, while Lynette's at the table. Lynette, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Deliverability-wise, very quickly, I've said it before, but I will say it again. We have actually quite a lot of contracts that are already in play, and quite a lot that are finishing in the next month or so. So, and to that degree, we have also started forward planning on a number of other projects. So the numbers also show part of our strategy, which is to actually plan to deliver more so that we can balance the workflow as we hit a hurdle, because we always do hit a hurdle. We've got something else that we can bring on to keep moving forward. That is all within the program that's agreed within the LTP. We also did quite a large amount of work through that LTP with you to look at the deliverability of the program, but also the risks of that program. So be really realistic about what we're going to do and when we're likely to be able to do it. Most of our all of our capital projects were stood down, of course, in level 4. Almost all of them stood back up straight away in level 3. Given the early stage of the year, I don't expect that to be an issue. We will likely have a few extension of time claims, and there might be a few costs associated with it, and there will be some COVID costs associated with it, but we will be able to finish those projects this financial year. It's not going to overlap. I think it is looking at only Dyer's Pass guardrails. As a chair, you are affected by that a bit.
I was delighted to see yesterday's notice.
They're starting to, and so they are only running a couple of weeks later than we expected, which is great. Our key risks in the program, we do have a few material risks, and they largely revolve around steel or componentry. So LED light componentry is one of them. Part of the way we got around that, or work to get around that, is to put large orders through at a time, so we have regular decent sized orders coming through, so we have plenty of stock on ground here to keep the contractors going. We can't guarantee that the boat's not going to be late or get stuck in the Suez Canal or something's going to happen, so it's trying to keep that going as much as we can and have regular orders through the system. The other one is steel, and we are, because a lot of our other components are local, gravel, bitumen seems to be addressed, so we are going all right with bitumen at the moment. But another one is steel, and it will be particular componentry for a project like stainless steel balustrades in a marine environment. They need to be a certain grade to last, to have and we can't get them here. We've got to come in from overseas. And the other one, which I heard Councillor Chen talk about, is often steel relating to rail. They have a particular grade that they bring in, and it comes in from overseas. So those are the things that do cause us some concern and delay, but we're just keeping talking with our suppliers and keeping going with it. We are also looking at seeing where we can provide temporary solutions. So it might be a stopgap. For example, with a light, we might put an old light up until a new component comes, something like that. So where we can do something temporary to keep things moving. And we are also looking at our at ensuring our tenders have reasonably long periods for delivery, so that the contractors can figure when they've got a bit better window when they can undertake their works. That gives them more certainty of doing that work. And that's about it for us.
So having lost a bit of time in construction on live projects through COVID level 4, and obviously taking into account what we've heard around procurement, supply chain, availability issues, it sounds as though you're pretty confident, given that we're this early in the year, that we can make up that lost time, and that with a bit of substitution, either of elements within a project or bringing forward, pushing back with projects, we should be able to get pretty close to meeting targets for this year.
Yes, we're still very confident on that because we're well progressed with the projects.
That's good to hear. Yeah. Thank you.
Can I add one thing, because I know it will get asked? You could ask it.
Let's preempt the question. Yep.
Kiwi Rail. We are still working with Kiwi Rail very closely. We're having regular meetings, and I know there was an action at the last meeting and to get a letter to Kiwi Rail CEO and board chair, and that those are in play at the moment and starting to make their way towards those people. The lockdown made it a little bit more difficult to coordinate, and so it took us a bit longer to get that underway, and I apologise for that. But we are still working with them, and we are still working with the staff on the ground. It is just a very long, slow process.
Yep. So that has been implemented. There's just been some delay.
Yeah.
All right, we can be confident in that. That's fine.
Her secret weapon as well.
Dawn.
Our discussion yesterday.
Our secret weapon.
Perfect. Right. So are there any questions on transport for Lynette while she's at the table? Mike.
Thank you, Lynette. On that note, so it's obviously the time frame to do this has been pushed out quite a lot from when it was originally meant to be done, and we're looking, I guess, at an interim solution.
Oh, to do the projects, yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry, on the railway
Sorry, I was
crossing.
thinking about a letter. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just concerned but how long this is going to take, and in the meantime we have, I guess, 2 crossings that are pretty unsafe for the amount of people and cars that are currently there, and I'm just wondering where we're at with actually looking at an interim solution to actually have some safety measures in place while we wait for the Kiwi Rail to come on board.
They also have to be engaged in the interim solutions. It is work on their land, so we do have to try and do that. That said, I'm actually going to propose we do a bit of a risk workshop and see if we can find something outside of their land that can help mitigate our risk at those at significant crossings.
So running parallel to the crossing, how far does their land extend? Because the interim solutions wouldn't actually cross the actual lines themselves. So I'd run parallel.
Yeah, they're 5 metres out, and if you're going to run a set of signals, they need to interplay with the bells you can't have the signals saying go and the bells saying stop. So they have to work together. So interim solutions are probably less electronic and more physical.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
All right, thank you. Yanni.
I think we were going to get an update on the CRAF projects. Have we had that through?
No, we didn't. That was something that did get missed on the last month, and I apologise for that. But a brief update from me on CRAF is we have got well underway, and we know we've got to get back to you with the list of safety projects.
Okay.
So there are a number of those underway. The work with the community boards on the areas and finalising their priority list has got a bit delayed over the last month, to 6 weeks. We have got our contractors on board, and we are starting to now look at how we can get going and get started, but it does depend on what the community boards have decided. I do understand that Coastal Bearwood, for example, has made a call on Marine Parade, so we've undertaken some quite invasive testing out there to understand exactly what we can build on what we've got, and the design's well underway now. So that's where we're at, but I will have to come back to you with a detailed update on that. I am also looking at how we can give you a better, regular, more visual update on that. It's just taking a bit of brain capacity to do that one.
Would provide it in the externally funded report in future.
Whether it's this or it's through the UDAT report, we haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing is, where do we get visibility of the CRAF money for PT?
That's the other one that we have to give you the update on. Yeah.
Okay, but can we...
But it is in the externally funded part of the...
Oh, and so in the report...
In the watch list, there's external funded projects, and it's broken down, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And when they break down further, once they've been confirmed, we'll include that in future reports.
So you'll get a time and cost update in this report regularly when we know the detail of the projects.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll get a how and why type of
update. Just in the report that we've got, from my looking at it for the CRAF money, we do have a separate section. It doesn't include the PT. So all the others are included, except the PT. It hasn't
been drawn down to individual projects yet, and they don't know. So they haven't got going on it yet.
Right. Could we add it so we get visibility though?
Once they are drawn down, they will be added.
Okay.
Yep, that's good.
Do we know what the process is for them being drawn down?
Once they've been confirmed, it will happen.
Okay. All right. I'm just worried we've got money sitting there that we don't have visibility of at all.
If it starts spending, it needs to be drawn down. They can't spend until it draws down. So it is just sitting at a program level at this point.
Right. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. First one on page 118. Yeah, also Jiangxin Road extension. I'm concerned that this project two issues. One is the budget, because in here, you show us, last month still the council approved budget is $12.5 million. Forecast also $12.5 million, but this month change to the $13.7 million. But this the figure still temporary, because you mentioned that's based on updated design cost and best information. But the Kiwi Rail, the program, the detailed information will be given to the council start in October or November. So in that time, probably still, have another amendment change. So I just want to know, even you mentioned earlier, the CE have engaged with their CE, etc., secret weapon, etc. But last month we mentioned the mayor would like to, on behalf of council, send a letter to responsible ministers. Am I right? So whether we send it to the ministers or not, I don't know. Whether can speak out those the
That's what we talked to. We're going to try and get to the CE to CE and me to chair. letters, and they're starting to go out the door. So that's
not yet.
That's what I answered before. Yes.
So the letter that Jimmy's asking about is
It's
the
underway.
same letter that you mentioned a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And so there's a budget. You know, the other one is concern the delivery time, because the couple months ago in finance performance committee, all the delivery time always in May of 2022, but last month we changed to the June of 2023. So consider the 30 months, behind those delivery time. But I'm particularly concerned based on the current situation, because the Kiwi Rail, the program, still the information not yet, provided to us. So whether this delivery schedule will be further delayed, is my concern. Or not, you already consider those 30 months is tolerate. All those reverse effect all consider.
So as we discussed at the last at the last meeting,
yes,
the change in this project was as a result of the changes that were predicted as the budget changes that were set in the LTP.
Yes.
So that was changed as part of the LTP. You asked us to look at deliverability. We did, changed the delivery profile. So then the dates changed. We have done the best estimate we can to give you the best estimate you can on when we think we will be delivering, given all of the communications that we've had with Kiwi Rail. I can't crystal ball gaze. I haven't got an absolute answer for you, Councillor. I'm sorry.
I think
But
it's
we
fair to
do
say
know-
as well that all projects, until we've tendered and got a contractor schedule, is subject to risk in time frame and cost.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there is still a very real risk of costs and time being exceeded. That's why we've marked it red on the watch list.
Okay. Second question, on page 126, the major cycleway facility. All this list, I didn't see the Southern Express, the major cycleway the facility in here. All the major cycleway in here, I didn't see where about. Why the list out?
South Express is in the externally funded projects.
What I mean?
In your externally funded projects.
Okay.
So as reported, isn't it?
Yes, it's on page 121.
121. Oh, sorry. Okay. Just want to know because I sent the issue to the C office on the 6th of September. Yeah, but particularly regarding the section 1 of the high to the Templeton. Particular Templeton 1, the Templeton community concern the section between the Grove Bay to the Watson's Road. This section, the contractor did some work before, but suddenly the stop, didn't work. So they asked what's the rationale. So I still cannot. Because I didn't get those one, but very concerned this one.
I will get back to you with a detailed response today. Our contractor has not started work. Selwyn District Council's contractor started some work out there. It's Selwyn District Council land.
But it's all
I've only
area.
just figured that through in the last.
So you'll get an
hours.
answer to Jimmy
you'll get a
outside
detailed
of the
answer
meeting
outside
with
of
answer
the
the
meeting.
question. All right, that's fine. Thank you.
I'll come back to you today, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything further? I'm keen to pick up the pace. We're moving slowly at the moment. All right. So nothing else on transport, Lynette. Thank you very much indeed.
Very much.
Ruth, back to you.
Excellent. All right, let's, Helen, Three Waters. So financial year 22 budget of 205, currently forecasting 188. So by way of contrast, Three Waters spent 153 last year, so need to deliver an additional 52 million this year.
So you'll see noted in the report that we are seeking additional resource, particularly in asset planning and in project management resource to deliver this. And executive leadership team have already approved an additional program manager in here. So we'll separate out our drinking water program from our wastewater program from our stormwater program, and we'll have 3 separate program managers over those to ensure that we're managing those programs as efficiently as possible. And one of the issues in there is, as Lynette said, is making sure we've got some projects sitting on the shelf if we need to do some substitutions, and keeping an overview on the program level and substituting those projects if we need to. There is a challenge at the moment, filling vacancies across design, asset planning, asset management and project managers, so that may cause us some problems over the next few months, but we'll stay optimistic on that for now and wait and see what happens as we advertise. The other thing that we're doing is that we are packaging up more of our renewals projects, and that's to save time for us and sort of transaction costs on each individual project, but also to give that certainty to the consultants and the contractors that they've got that work to deliver and they've got the time to do that. So there's a couple of things that we're doing in there. And I think finally we are also taking that project by project approach to looking at what equipment we require and whether or not some early purchase is required. So that is also in the mix for some of our work. And happy to take questions.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions for Helen? Yanni?
I mean, it's kind of a general question around like what we've just heard at the start of this presentation, and then looking to spend more money and do more with either existing resource or trying to acquire additional resource and capacity. And to me, it seems quite a big contradiction, like with the supply chain issues. So, what thoughts gone into rescoping what we do rather than trying to get additional resource so we can meet what we can do what we say we're going to do based on the earlier presentation?
So we had already signalled an increasing program in Three Waters, so we'd signalled that early to the Contractors Forum and to the consultants, so they were aware of that and have been gearing up for it, and we've also been gearing up for it internally. So I don't think we need to do that right now. However, over the next few months we'll have a much better idea of what we can deliver and whether or not some rescoping of that is necessary.
Okay, but fundamentally with Three Waters, we're pretty well prepared, pretty well programmed, and have a kind of degree of confidence that we can meet what they were going to do.
And some of that will come clearer over the next few weeks. So we don't fully understand the impact of the COVID lockdown, right, and we don't fully understand what the employment market is like out there, although we have been getting very good responses to advertisements across council and in Three Waters. So, we're reasonably optimistic about that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for Helen? All right, Helen, thank you very much indeed. Ruth, back to you.
Darren, in terms of community, so there's 2 big projects that are in the community space. We've got the Otakaro Avon River Corridor and Naval Point. They've got a budget of 33 million this year, forecasting 34, and last year spent 25.
Thanks, Ruth. Kia ora koutou. Much greater degree of confidence in delivering more of our program this year. As Ruth said, we've got 134 projects essentially from the ground up. A large number of those are further along in the project phase. We're relying on a couple of the big hitters to bring home a large expenditure, and highly confident there. We've got the 3 bridges under construction at the moment in the Otakaro Avon River Corridor. We're completing the works in Littleton for the Naval Point Phase 1 development work. So alone between those 2, there's $10 million worth of works to complete. We are also, for some of the smaller projects, still hamstrung with supply chain issues. We've also got issues with MIQ spaces for specialist applicators coming into the country to do, for example, a rolled roof on Cal Stadium. So every one of these smaller projects still have the same issues. Yanni, you talked about a delay with provision. We're buying new slides from a company within Aotearoa in Palmerston North. Normally 6 weeks, currently 28 weeks. So they're steel that are powder coated, same sort of thing. So big projects aside, there's still these issues of supply of both personnel and product. So we are working really hand in glove with Jane's team to do analysis around that in terms of how we go to contract, risk around delivery of those bits and pieces. We're working closer with the legal services team around contract and risk. And Ruth's team also provide a monthly health check for all of our projects in terms of an independent review of how they're going and probability of deliverability. So take any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions? No questions? Yanni?
I mean,
I'll put the question through around the playground renewals and the equipment. So I'm just kind of interested in, we've got projects that we've currently already signed off on that we were supposed to have already built that we're not building because we've had delays. What's the communication? Have we got a communication resource to communicate to the community on the community ones around why things are being delayed and what the anticipated timeframes are?
I've got an answer here which I'm happy to email to you. So the two you mentioned, Yanni, the King Park and the Radley Playground, they're due to start within 2 weeks. Start work notices will be going out.
Right.
So as I say, we've scheduled these programs based around what was happening last year, 6 to 8 weeks delivery, and we're up to week 28. But the supplier in Palmerston North has confirmed they are coming. And our project managers keep in touch with community boards as well. And the local communities that are impacted here will have start work notices coming out next week.
Yeah, I just wonder whether there needs to be something a bit more than a start work notice, something that just kind of explains to people what's happened. I mean, when people make submissions and expect things to happen, rather than waiting for them to complain that they haven't seen anything and it's long overdue, it'd be quite good to be able to communicate, when we know that there's a delay, to say, hey, sorry, we said we would do it on this time frame. But actually, because of COVID, people will understand. But I think when they don't hear, they get kind of upset. So
yep.
I guess I'm just wondering if you have a kind of communication resource other than the start work notice that kind of keeps people briefed where things are being delayed as to the reason why.
Yep, it's a fair comment, and we'll probably need to do more of that as these supply chain and delay issues come on as an organisation as well.
Cool. Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So Darren, thank you for that. Nothing further.
Alrighty, Simon, IT. So Simon's out, CIO. So the IT forecast, I just need to say, has been adjusted since the writing of this report to reduce the forecast that was sitting at a program level. So it now just reflects our projects for delivery this year. So that's currently at 22 as opposed to the 27 in the report. And last financial year, IT spent 14 million.
Good afternoon. So I'm just going to go through some of the key points. I'll try and keep it snappy in the interest of time. As Ruth mentioned, we have recalibrated the forecast. Now we've done some more detailed planning, so we think that's more realistic and sitting where it needs to be. Contextual, unlike last year, we have been able to maintain the momentum transitioning into this financial year. So we're tracking for the first 2 months 3 times higher spend than the same time last year. First 2 months have also been within 6% of forecast accuracy, so we're sharpening up our accuracy there as well. Contextual numbers, 48 projects are in flight that were initiated in FY21 but cross over into FY22 as well, and thus far we've initiated another 15 projects as well and expect more to be initiated over the coming months. ELT have been very supportive of us looking at the digital capital portfolio rather than in a 12-month slice, and a 3-year program view, which is giving us a lot more flexibility to bring initiatives forward, push them out depending on how sequencing needs to happen, because digital is very fast-paced and unfortunately full of surprises along the way. So that's been very supportive and very helpful. It's given us the ability to program in 65% of our 3-year capital budget, and we expect that number to go much higher obviously over the next few months. Very similar themes to others that have come up around deliverability. Main risk is around workforce constraints. IT market is very active, very competitive, so we do have to attend to staff retention challenges as well. Mitigations in place, we are making use of contractor workforce, also panel partner providers. We are getting a little creative as well, where we are recruiting people offshore, allowing them to work remotely until they are able to come on shore. So I was on the phone this week to somebody in Australia, another new starter in Argentina, and another one in Brazil. So we're being creative there. COVID lockdown, the current COVID lockdown impacts haven't been significant, and it's, I guess the main challenges relate to equipment and that procurement process, like I'm hearing for others. But from a materiality, from the overall program, it's not that high.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. All right, so no questions. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
One more, parks.
Indeed.
Andrew. So against a budget of 11 million, parks are currently forecasting 10, and last year spent 5.4.
Kia ora. I'll keep this brief. So I guess in terms of deliverability and confidence around deliverability, there has been quite a shift already. We've had, over the last 6 months, we've had a seconded role who's entirely focused on our program. So just so, I'm not sure if there's confusion or not, there's about 220 plus parks projects in the capital program, of which we deliver within our parks unit. We've got 103 of those, and the rest are delivered by Darren and Al's team. So just in case people didn't understand that. So I'm talking to what our parks unit does ourselves, our rangers, etc. In terms of deliverability against last year, about 6 million of the program sits in the top 20 projects, and of those, 50% of them are already in contract, in flight. So that's giving me a lot more confidence around the numbers and the volume of projects that we can deliver. Going forward, we've been focusing a lot more in the last couple of months on accurate forecasting, and we're now moving into commitment. So we're putting together a procurement plan using as many existing contracts as we can for delivery of lots of small items. You know, we have some projects codes that are sort of 20k and less, and lots of them. So I'm personally feeling a lot more confident in terms of our deliverability from where we are this time last year. Happy to answer any specific questions.
Great, thank you. Sarah.
Thanks so much, Andrew. I'm just wondering how the getting on board of the new ranges and things that we approved in the LTP is going.
Yeah.
Because part of that is that deliverability stuff, right?
It is, exactly. I literally just came from a job sizing meeting this morning, so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to advertise those very, very shortly.
Yeah, so one of my questions is, when we're looking at deliverability now and in future years, because those positions, we've set them as 3 years, so it's the length of the 3-year section of the LTP, those jobs will end up then finishing at the end of June 2024, and then if we have approved them again, it has to go through another 4-month process to try and get people on board again. Will there be a proposal coming to us to maybe make those permanent, to save that kind of thing?
That was the intent, and it was signalled in the initial application, if you like, that we would like to find a way to make these roles permanent.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yanni.
Sorry, just to understand, we only achieved 61% of the core program last year. We're adding $6.5 million to it for this year, and we're confident that we're going to meet that target. Are we putting additional resource into delivering more? Like, how are we going to... I'm still sort of struggling to understand.
So what we've done with the way we've set up that 200 projects is work with Darren and his team to make sure that we're not overloading them. So we've taken on more ourselves this year within the unit. Okay. And what we've done within the unit is distributed responsibility for delivery of those smaller programs wider. So effectively, with the existing resource we have within the unit, yes, we have more people focused on capital.
You do, okay.
So more people with smaller delivery requirements than having too few people trying to deliver too many projects. The thing that's really quite challenging when you have this many projects is you have, to a degree, a similar amount of project admin required for a $10,000 project as a $100,000 project. And so by distributing that load across the unit wider, it takes some of that pressure away.
Right. And does your group buy services from the capital design group or whoever?
We do when we need to, as all parks projects do when they need to, yes.
Is that kind of an efficient model? Like, I'm just thinking of like things that come at a local level
Well, you're buying it one way or the other. You're either buying it externally or internally.
Right.
We don't have all of the wide range of resources available within the parks unit, obviously.
I wouldn't expect to, because
No.
it's a council approach. This isn't an independent unit that's separate from council.
No.
Right. So, but like when we're waiting at community board to get landscape plans back, for example, we end up waiting, months and months and months. It's the engagement's done. It's just, is there a bottleneck at that technical getting the design stuff done, and how does that get addressed through
better planning?
Your team.
I'll put my hand up. Our team hasn't been as efficient as they could have been with forward planning, because we're often spending a lot of time reacting to community demand, but we're changing that paradigm now so that we're getting ourselves to a position where we can be starting to think a year or two out, so that we can give early notice to those internal service providers.
I'm very conscious of time. We're beyond 1 o'clock, and I'd said that we'd break for lunch at 1, and I'm keen to finish this item before we break for lunch. Are there any further questions? All right, so Andrew, thank you very much indeed. So Ruth, that's all of our presenters.
Yep, that's right. We have Alistair online, but you have heard from him today already, so unless there's any questions, I won't ask him to speak.
Yep, absolutely.
And then finally, I just wanted to call out the Capital Works map, which sits on our external website, and a reminder about that it has our current start and end dates for all projects in Christchurch. It's all our current projects in flight this financial year. So if you just put ccc.govt.nz/construction projects, you'll find it. But there's also a link on page 101.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So once again, thanks to you and all of the presenters for an excellent and thorough presentation. I mean, I think what we've got is a situation where we changed the format of having the heads of the leaders presenting their work areas to us. That was before we got into some of these areas of concern that we've got with supply chain issues and the further lockdown and so on. I think that really is starting to show its worth now. That format has really worked well now that we've got some particular areas of interest in the current situation. So thank you to you and the team for all of the work that you're doing. So we've got a recommendation in front of us to receive the information in the report. I'm happy to move that. Sarah will second. Is there any debate? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'll now adjourn the meeting until 2 o'clock, where we've got 2 open agenda items to deal with. And then we'll move into public excluded and deal with the public excluded agenda after that. So let's come back at 2 o'clock, finish the open agenda and move on from there. Adjourned until 2. Thank you.